Loki Episode 3 Lamentis. As you can see, we have Tiny Loki here once again. He's got a little pedestal now because I got a little Father's Day gift here because he's just so tiny. I was like, it needs a boost. Um, Episode 3 was okay. I enjoyed it. It definitely had some really cool moments. It had one amazing moment story-wise. It had like the one giant thing where I was like, oh, that I didn't see coming. Technically, the ending I didn't see coming as well, but it wasn't as epic as like the great reveal that we had. But we'll go from beginning to end. We, of course, have picking up right where the last episode left off. Loki goes after Sylvie. They end up in the TVA, and it was cool. They had a decent little fight scene. We actually see Sylvie try to use her enchantment abilities, but they don't work. And I thought that was cool. I was like, okay, because there's a part of the mysteries. Like I've seen some people reference, like, oh, maybe she used to be a part of that and she broke free or something like that. And I'm like, well, that doesn't seem to be the case unless she forgot, which could be possible. I don't think that's the case considering her, her powers and everything, and it literally involves going back in time through people's brains and memories and things like that. So I highly doubt that she used to be there and then somehow they managed to erase her memories, but she broke out. But at the same time, that could have been something that she chose to do, and so they wiped her memories from before, and then, like, it's possible. I just kind of doubt it because of how her powers work. I feel like that wouldn't be the case. She would have known that. But they could write it in there and say, like, well, we made you forget. It wasn't magic based, so once you got out and you had your magic back, it wasn't anything you thought, to look for. So that could still be the case, but I thought it was cool. It was like, okay, she went in, she tried to hit the dude, and I love the face that he made when she did it. It was like, wait, what the hell, what was this touching me? And then, of course, he dies, so he's dead anyway. She kills a couple other people. Of course, Loki comes in. They have their little back and forth banter, and then that woman, that Owen Wilson talks to, because I swear I can't remember her. I know it starts with an R. I know it's like a crazy name. I feel like somewhere in there her name is kind of almost like Slayer, but it's not. It starts with an R. But she comes in and is like, you can kill him, what do I care? And then, of course, they both end up dropping into the planet Lamentis 1 in 2077, if I'm not mistaken. And I love the way they did it. It was cool. It was like the whole episode is like, all right, we need to find a way out of here because if we don't, we'll be dead. You jumped us to like the worst apocalypse ever, and there's literally nowhere to go. It's not like, oh, we can just run really far to the next city. This whole planet is destroyed. The moon is coming down in chunks into this entire planet, and we need power because the little jump pad, I'm just going to call it that, of course, the battery's low, which I thought was a really funny way to do that, where it's like, this amazing timeless technology is like, batteries though, sorry. And that's what, that's basically what they thought would get them killed. So they team up, they learn a little bit about each other, they end up having their kind of team up moments. Sylvie gets blasted, they have the Kill Bill moment where she kicks the door in, boom, she gets blasted by a sonic shotgun. I thought that was cool. Loki's like, oh, that was a cool moment for me, I really enjoyed that. And then he decides, I'm going to pretend to be, the guy in the picture. And my first thought was, well, this dude's going to be dead, and she's going to be like, he died. Like, that was stupid. But instead it was just that he was a douchebag, and she was like, he's never said anything nice like that in forever. So I was like, oh, okay. And then they just ask her, and she's just like, oh, yeah, well, it's the Ark, and you got to get on the train, which will never work anyway. And she was kind of just there and was like, yep, I'm going to die, and I know it. And she was just like, that's it. That's the end of my life. So they go to the train. They, once again, talk about their plans and disguise and guile and all that good stuff. And they have to, slowly but surely, it's like they hate each other. They go through that moment where they try their plans separately, at the house. And Loki's like, hey, like you don't have to go in kind of guns blazing. It's not going to work. And then his way failed too because he wasn't thinking too straight about it. And so then they have to go through and they do it again. But this time they actually team up. And so he goes through and he disguises himself. And then, of course, they need the tickets. Sylvie does her enchantment thing, and then they still end up making it through. Loki, for whatever reason, ends up getting super drunk, but before that, they have a really cool moment where they have a serious conversation about being adopted. I hate that I always forget that thing is on, but they talk about being adopted and how Sylvie actually knew the whole time, and so he was shocked, like, oh, although there's still a million questions there, because it's like, well, she was adopted, and she knows that, but we still don't know if she's, like, half ice giant, or if she's just like adopted from like a different species. She could even be half human technically. So there's a lot of interesting things. We do find out that she actually taught herself her magic, which I thought was pretty cool. So they still have a lot of questions kind of left up in the air, and it was like, okay, that's definitely something. But it was really cool, and as they go through, great reference to Thor 1, by the way, when Loki says that the drink is good. He's like, I'll have another, and he throws it. That was a reference to Thor 1. I was like, that's a great callback to like probably like one of the best moments in that movie. So I thought that was super cool. I really enjoyed that. And then of course they go through and it's like, oh, well, him dancing around and singing and all this extra stuff caught the attention of someone else who was like, I'm rich. And he doesn't seem like one of the rich people I know. And so, of course, they get busted. They have a fight. Loki manages to get thrown out of a train through a window, and Sylvie, of course, has to go after him. He takes a tumble, and of course, the thing breaks. So it's like, well, we're screwed. We're gonna die. And his plan is, hey, what if we just save the Ark? Like, we'll just get on the Ark and we'll save her from being destroyed. That's the new plan. They walk a lot in this, which was interesting. They took a lot of time walking, and the only unfortunate thing about that is, despite the fact that it was cool that it allowed for them to talk more and we get to know each other, it leads to, I think that was like their third giant walk that they had, I think, in that episode. And that leads to the big reveal that the opening scene that we had with like the memories, I of course assumed, I'm sure like most people, Sylvie just made it up, like, oh, we're just friends hanging out. And it turns out that was specifically a memory that Sylvie kind of just took and she put herself in there. And she was like, oh, I had to go back hundreds of years from before she worked with the TVA. And so then it turned out that not only was she just a normal human, but she was actually taken in by the TVA. And then we find out that she was actually a variant. Everyone is. Everyone that works at the TVA is a variant, which is very interesting. And then that leads to, some very specific questions about, people who haven't met the TVA and the one person who seems to have met the TVA. So it's interesting. A lot, that was like the epic moment of the whole episode. And of course, I wish we had a little bit more of that. But that was the one moment, like, okay, as far as the overall series, that was like that one moment, because this was definitely, it felt like a filler episode, but I'm sure there's definitely elements that are going to play into the future storyline of the series, especially considering the whole episode focused on our two variants and them getting to know each other at least a little bit. So I'm like, all right, they talk a lot, they get to know bits and pieces about each other. Like I said, there's still a million questions, so we don't get to learn like every single thing, but they drop some pieces here and there. And considering the way this episode ends, I think we'll continue that in the next episode, and we might get a little bit more, because now that they, by the time they get to the end, it's like, all right, they go through their cool sort of, their one shot thing, and I was like, okay, there are definitely a couple of cuts there. I could tell, like when they're inside the building and they pan like through the doorway, I was like, oh, that was a slick little shot. They did like all the tricks. So I was like, okay, this is cool. And they're running through and stuff. Loki pulls off a move that was really interesting, where he just stopped the whole building and just sent it flying backwards. He also blasts a couple people, which we've never seen before. But I was like, okay, those seem really tiny. Those I was just like, oh, that's interesting. Like, he can shoot somebody backwards. And I didn't really question that too much, even though, once again, it's something that we haven't seen. But I was like, okay, that I didn't really question too much. I was just like, okay, that's a tiny thing. It's a lot like a lot of the stuff in this series, even personality-wise for the character. I was like, oh, he seems a bit different. But at the same time, we've never really gotten that much out of Loki. Like, there's a lot of stuff, even from other episodes, where it's like, yeah, it seems like he's less genius. Excuse me, because he definitely was like the evil genius character. That's how he always seemed. But in this, he's so far out of his element that it's like, I feel like this makes sense. Like, it's kind of jarring because of how we saw his character before, but we've never seen him in this type of situation, so it kind of makes sense. Like, even though it's weird because we've never seen him so jokey and stuff like that, he's also way beyond being outside of his element compared to all the other movies. And we've definitely seen him out of his element. I think Thor 2, I think, is a good example of him kind of being out of his element, where he was trying to do things here and there, and it was like, oh man, he effed up, he got his mom killed. He pulled off the fake move in that one to pretend that he actually died and got his hand chopped off and all that stuff, and then he takes over for his dad at the end. I was like, okay, like that, I would say, is probably the closest we've seen to this version of Loki, where it's like he's kind of out of his element and he thinks he's going in. It's like, I got this, and it's like, you really don't. Like, there's so much stuff that you just don't understand yet. So I enjoyed it. I like the action. I thought it was pretty cool. The crazy building move where he just stopped it and sent it back, I was like, huh, that's a new one. That's definitely bigger than just like he hit a dude and some green lights came out and sent him flying backwards using like telekinesis, which is kind of referenced with the whole Roomba thing where he summoned it to him. And I feel like we've seen that with the swords. Like, that's what he was trying to do in the first episode. And I'm like, I swear we've seen that before, because I've seen other reviews, even from the other episodes, where people mention that he's never done stuff like that. But I'm like, I could have sworn we've seen it, like, in one of the movies at least, where he's actually had to, like, summon the swords specifically, like, to fly towards him. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but I was like, I could have sworn I've seen something where he's specifically, like, basically used the Force and was like, let me just get that. So maybe I'm wrong, but I felt like I'd seen that before, so it didn't feel new to me. And I was like, if that is the case, then this would be like just, him with the building falling down would just be like the super giant version of that. But I don't know. Either way, I thought it was entertaining. And then the way it ends, I was like, oh, Didn't think that was the ending. I thought it was gonna keep going, and they would, it would cut to like the next conversation, and then the music kicked in, and I was like, okay. I thought once it got destroyed, I was like, okay, they're gonna have a conversation, and then it was gonna be that kind of classic story where it's like, oh, okay, the TVA will, it's TV writing, so they'll just happen to find them just before it's a little bit too late, and that's how the story continues, and the whole point is just getting the characters a little bit closer, and so that they understand each other a bit better. And that didn't happen. So I am excited to see what happens in this next episode. They could easily still do that, where like the whole next episode, it seems like nothing's going to happen, and they do continue to get closer, and then the TVA just happens to end up finding them. So that could still happen. I am excited for the next episode still, but this one was definitely my least favorite. I don't think it was bad, but it was definitely my least favorite. And with the giant walks that they had, as cool as the CG is, because I'm assuming that they're using the same stuff as they use for The Mandalorian, which is like the volume, I believe they call it. So it's like you could tell, obviously, it was CG, but technically it was like CG on an actual screen that just, like, it's amazing technology. If you haven't looked it up, just look up the stuff on Disney Plus for The Mandalorian. Excuse me. And there you go. Like, it's just amazing. It's like some of the most amazing technology ever. But the whole episode was very CG, and I was just like, it's cool, and I like it, but I'd much rather see them at the TVA. Like, I would much rather see, like, really cool, legit set design. Even if it was a normal place, if I'm being totally honest, it could be, like, my boring-looking apartment, and I'd be like, I'd still probably prefer that to, like, the giant, vast CG expanse of this very purple planet. And I like the color design of it. I thought that was very cool. Although I'm excited to see them do something where it's like in a brighter location. I want to see Sylvie's like full outfit, because there during like the ending scene where she like takes her jacket off, I was like, oh, that's cool. You can kind of see her outfit, but it was also really dark still. And I was like, oh, it's green, so, and it's like a dark green. It's more emerald. So I was like, dang, I wish we could see it a little bit more. But I was like, oh, that looks kind of cool. So I'm hoping that it's only like half or maybe less than half of the next episode, and then it's like, okay, here you go. Here's what her whole costume looks like in a bright, setting, because I was like, it looks kind of cool, and I want to see the whole thing. But all in all, I enjoyed the episode. I just wasn't blown away by it. I felt like this one, kind of like the last one, it was like, okay, it felt like a lot happened, but at the same time, not enough happened. Like, it felt like there was a lot of time. I felt like what sticks out more is the fact that they walk so much more than the conversations they really had, because it seemed like they didn't get deep enough, where it was like, oh, he didn't know he was adopted. She knew she was adopted. And it's like, that's interesting. And then they don't really go into that too much more. It's like, he knew his mom. She didn't know her mom. And it's like, okay, that's cool, but that's still really, really surface level. Like, there are a million other questions. Did you have a Thor? Did you have a Hela? Did you deal with that stuff? With the different timelines, things can happen faster than in other timelines and stuff like that. So there's how, she mentions having done this plan for years. Maybe talk a little bit more about that. Like, you say years. What started this journey? Was there someone else that did it? Did you do it yourself? What was the variation that actually ended up happening that caused you to want to take out, the TVA? Still a bunch of questions. And so they had a lot of different conversations, but they didn't get like crazy deep into the stuff where I was like, this is really what I want to know. They kind of just touched on stuff that was like, that's interesting to know, but it's nowhere near what I really like wanted to know, which is like way, way over there. And so I was like, like they did a lot of talking and a lot of walking. And aside from like the one epic reveal about, the TVA, the whole villain thing, like what's really happening there, other than that, it was just like really surface level stuff that I wasn't really super attached to. So I was just like, it wasn't as cool as the last two episodes, but doesn't mean I'm not excited for the next one, especially with them making it kind of a two-parter. I think it'll definitely be, the second half, I think I'll enjoy more than this first half, even though I still enjoyed it. It was just like, oh, okay. It ends on this cliffhanger, which I thought was a decent way to end it. But I am just curious to see exactly how they get out of it. Is Loki kind of messing with her? Did the thing actually break? Did it not really break? I don't think it did, just because of how they've been kind of playing him in the series. But at the same time, they could just be like, surprise, it's been fine this whole time, and he's just been trying to slowly but surely get a little bit more information. And right when he's like, okay, I might actually die here, he'll pull out the jump pad, as I'm going to call it, and he'll be like, yeah, it didn't actually break when I fell off the train. I just made it look that way. And then it was just him, being Loki. And that would be super cool. If they reveal that in the next episode, that would actually be amazing. And even if they don't, I'm fine with it. That would just be a cooler reveal to me, to be like, oh, he was so manipulative that he was like, oh man, we're going to die. Like, he came up with a plan B, after like breaking the thing. Like that would be really interesting just to see that happen. And I'm like, if they do it, that'll be great. If not, it's still fine. But I would love to see that happen just because it would be like, oh, okay, that felt like, you know, really classic movie Loki that we're used to. But either way, I am excited for the next episode. And of course, we'd love to know what you guys thought about it. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. Let me know your favorite parts, your least favorite parts. And of course, what do you guys think about Sylvie? What's going to happen with her? What's going to happen with the TVA? What are your thoughts on that epic reveal? I thought that was a really great moment. Once again, wish we had more stuff like that where I was just like, wow, like, you know, questions and like, what does that mean and stuff like that. And it was just like that one epic moment. And then everything else kind of felt like filler, admittedly. But it does serve a purpose. And I think we'll see more of that purpose as we get to the end of the next episode, where this was, you know, especially if they seem to be doing kind of a two-parter for them on Lamentis. I think it's definitely that sort of element where it'll be like, you know, together, you know, it'll just be a lot better than the separate episodes individually. Not that this was horrible, but I definitely like the first two episodes way more than I enjoyed this one. Set design being one of the big reasons, honestly. It was just like, cool, they're just walking on CG. And it just like, you can just feel it. Like, it's just a big CG planet, and it's just like, I wish they were in something real. Like, when they're inside the sets and stuff, that looks great. When they're in, like, that weird, you know, city, like, at the end, and the way it looks with the alien signs and stuff like that, and all the, you know, alien neon, and they go through the bar, all that looked fantastic. I loved how it looked when they were on an actual set within the giant CG purple. But when it was just, like, the vast landscape, which was most of the episode, I was just like, I don't know, something about it even took away from, like, the conversations they had, just because it was like, I was somewhat distracted of, like, these giant, like, wide shots where it's just like, look at the expanse and how far they have to travel and this and that. And I was just like, yeah, like, it just was, I don't know, I just wasn't blown away by it. But like I said, we'll let us know what you guys thought about this episode. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.